Hi, I'm Adam Porter, and yesterday we finished 10 videos. Over the last 10 days I've been showing videos of my top 100 board games that I really love, games that emotionally connect with me. And over the last couple of days, a couple of people have sort of commented on the videos with their own guesses at what my final 10 games would be, and I said I would feed back on those after I'd given away my top 10. So I really enjoyed all the interaction with people. I really enjoyed the comments, reading the comments, responding to the comments, hearing about which games you like, what would go in your top 100, games that you hadn't heard of that maybe I'd introduced you to. I really like that idea. I know it's quite an eclectic sort of top 100, a whole mix of different things. Partly that's because it wasn't just the 100 sort of best designed games. This was the 100 games that I feel that I'm particularly sort of connected to. You know, the games that have a place in my heart, really. Games that I've got a lot of nostalgia for, or I've had really good experiences with. And it's been nice to be able to share some of those stories of what's happened when I've played those games over the years. But I thought we'd have a look at these guesses, and I'll talk about what my opinions are of those games. You can see some of those games are actually on the shelves behind me now. So the first set of 10 that was listed was Loki, who suggested that maybe I would have the games Azul or Sagrada on my list. I haven't played Sagrada. I suspect I'd probably quite like it. It's a dice drafting game, so you're selecting dice from a pool, putting them on your board. I don't know much about it. I own the game Role Player, which I like, which I believe is very similar. I did purchase Sagrada at one point, and then it didn't get played for quite some time, and I ended up trading it, I think. But yeah, it's still on. It's one of those ones where you trade it away and then you regret it, and you think, oh, I'd really like to have an opportunity to play that at some time. Azul, I have played a couple of times. I really like Michael Kiesling, who is the designer of Azul. I really like a lot of his games. He did well on my top 100. But Azul didn't particularly connect with me. I really like the aesthetic of it. I really like those little tiles, the thickness of them. They look very beautiful. But the actual gameplay, I found it was fine. You know, it was okay, but it didn't really sort of grab me. It felt a bit like doing a roll and write game, but without all of the sort of convenience of it being a roll and write game. That's how I felt about it. It wasn't a particularly satisfying puzzle for me, but I haven't tried the other versions. I haven't tried Stained Glass of Sinatra, I don't know what it's called, or the Summer Pavilion games. You know, I'd be very happy to play those games again. What was next on Loki's list was Castles of Burgundy. Castles of Burgundy is one that I did own a number of years ago. I really liked. There was one point where I was buying up a lot of Stefan Feld games, and I think that was probably the issue. I had Notre Dame, and I had Castles of Burgundy, and In the Year of the Dragon, and then I played Trajan and Bora Bora, and those games just I was just done with it at that point. I really liked Luna and also later Bruges, but Bora Bora and Trajan I just found overwhelming with the number of different mechanisms all sort of tied together in it, and so I kind of just got rid of all my Stefan Feld stuff, and I wish I hadn't. I wish I still had Castles of Burgundy and Notre Dame particularly, because they were the two that I enjoyed the most of those, and I'd like to give them another go. So maybe I'll pick them up again at some point. The next one on Loki's list was Seven Wonders. This is another one that I owned for many years. I had all the expansions and everything like that, and I just found I never played it. I always opted for Sushi Go, or other drafting games. Medieval Academy I used to like playing that one. And now Bunny Kingdom. I would always play Bunny Kingdom over Seven Wonders. So for Seven Wonders, the main thing that got in the way for me was all the iconography. I could never remember what all those icons meant. And I'd always constantly have to go back to that back page of the rule book to see what the icons were, and then trying to teach it to other people when I didn't fully get it myself was tough. And it's just because I don't play this. It wasn't a game that I played frequently enough to get to grips with the icons. So that sort of killed it for me. Seven Wonders Duel I do like. Seven Wonders Duel I don't play very often, but as a two-player head-to-head game, it's one that I can appreciate, although it has the same issue with the icons as Seven Wonders. Century Spice Road, that was on the list. I didn't get on with Century Spice Road when I tried that. I wasn't... I was surprised that I didn't particularly enjoy Splendor when that one came out, because everyone was raving about Splendor, but I found it a little bit dry. I didn't find it was something that particularly connected with me, and Century Spice Road felt the same, fairly procedural really. That said, I think what happened when I played Century Spice Road was that we had a particularly unfortunate sort of card draw. I think the cards that came out, maybe the deck hadn't been properly shuffled, it was a brand new copy of the game, and as a result we had a weird game where things just weren't really functioning properly, and it was a bit drawn out and dull. So I'd really like to give it another go. I particularly love the artwork on the Gollum edition. I think that looks great. Next on the list then was Orleans. Yeah, Orleans I really liked. That's a fairly substantial Euro game with a bag building element, like a much more strategic version of Quacks of Quedlinburg or something like that, where you're putting tokens into the bag and then drawing them back out, buying better tokens. I enjoyed that one. It didn't hugely connect with me. I think the thematic side of it didn't really make that much sense what was going on, so you had to really enjoy the puzzle, and I quite enjoyed the puzzle, but not enough to spend the money on getting the ultimate version of it. That said, I would happily play Orleans at any time. Viticulture is one that I often think about picking up. Viticulture I do like. I have played Viticulture a couple of times. I mentioned on the list I really like Stonemaier Games productions generally. Viticulture, the thing that bothers me is the kind of race aspect of it. I'm not a huge fan of games which just come to a sudden end when somebody hits a certain target and everybody else just doesn't really get to finish what they were doing. I find that a bit frustrating. Uncertain sort of timing of the ending. I like to know when the end of the game is coming. But I do really like all the mechanisms in Viticulture. It's a really good worker placement game with some nice little twists, really nice production of it. The wine making really works for me as a theme. My wife is German. She's from Franconia, from a village that is particularly, all about wine making. When you look up at the hills, all you see is grapes, plants all the way up, surrounding the whole village. So Viticulture does connect with me. I think I could really get to love that if I got myself a copy. Pandemic Legacy was on Loki's list. I've never particularly got into Pandemic. I'm not a huge cooperative gamer. You probably noticed that from my top 100 list. There aren't a massive number of cooperative games, and the ones that are on there tend to be a little bit weirder. Things like Magic Maze, where we're all cooperating, but there's some quirky mechanism in there. I think Flashpoint Fire Rescue is the main sort of true sort of co-op experience, like the Pandemic style experience that I have enjoyed. But Pandemic Legacy, I've thought about it over time. I haven't played many Legacy games. I've played Charterstone and I've played My City all the way through, and I've had fun with it. I do enjoy that sort of playing the same game over and over again with my wife and exploring the sort of story of it. So I would have a look at Pandemic Legacy, but I'm just not certain that I'd enjoy it, and so as a result I haven't picked it up. Clank, which is next on Loki's list, is actually high on my list of things to buy. I've never played Clank, but I'm pretty sure I'd like it. Deck building game, like deck building games. Dungeon crawling sort of game, yeah, I really like that sort of setting, going into a dungeon. I like this whole idea of trying not to make noise when you're going into the dungeon, but your deck picking up these Clank cards. I don't know much about the game, I haven't looked into it hugely, but I keep hearing wonderful things about it, and the fact that there's now a legacy version really makes me think, yeah, this might be the next one to run through, the next legacy game to run through with my wife, and I suspect I'd probably really enjoy it. I had a look at the game, in fact, a day or two ago, but the price tag put me off. I mean, we're talking a sort of 90, I think it was, yeah, £90 or £89 or something like that was the sort of prices I was seeing online, and I thought, couldn't quite bring myself to pull the trigger, but I'm sure I will at some point. So Clank is a serious possibility for the future, as is Loki's next suggestion of Space Base. Space Base, I keep hearing, is a better version of Machikoro. I like Machikoro. I think it's a fun game. I like that system of rolling the dice and then your cards activating based on what you've rolled. I'm a big fan of dice rolling games. And Space Base apparently is a sort of improvement, more strategic version. The last one on Loki's list was Chronicles of Crime, which I suspect I probably would like. But, do you know, I've never played a board game with an app in it. I just haven't. The closest I've ever come is this.
That's one gamble that definitely didn't pay off. Better luck next time.
Yeah, that's it. Monopoly. Tropical Tycoon is the closest I've come to playing a board game with an app. I like a board game where I can just open up the box and everything I need is in that box. I don't really want to be... I've just thought of an app. I tried the Imperial Assault app. I tried to play Imperial Assault solo with the app, and I found it an absolute nightmare. I just couldn't get on with it at all. But I do like to open the box, have all the pieces in there to play with, and just get on with it. And I do use board games as an escape from screens and technology and things like that. So yeah, I've got to get over that, really, haven't I? Because it's more and more games that are using apps, and it is important to keep up with this stuff if you're interested in working in the industry. And I'm sure Chronicles of Crime is exactly the sort of game I would enjoy, that deduction style of things. I mean, my own game, Zooligans, is a deduction game, and games like The Key, which was a huge favourite of mine this year. That is a deduction style game, looking at crimes, trying to work out who did it. So Chronicles of Crime probably would really, really work for me, but I haven't played it. The next list was Unfussy Board Games, who suggested Kemet. I don't think I'd like Kemet. I didn't enjoy Cyclades and I didn't enjoy Innis, which are both sort of in the same range, I believe, of games from Matago. I do like a lot of games from Matago. But that's sort of miniatures, dudes on a map, fighting thing, and people will tell me it's not that. It's a Euro hybrid game, I know that. And so that's why I gave Cyclades a go, but it didn't really work for me, and I can't even remember why. But it certainly wasn't like a bad group. A lot of games I played them and I think, well, I didn't enjoy that, but that's because I think I was playing with the wrong people. No, I was playing Cyclades with people I really like, and I still didn't have a good time with it. So my own personal taste, but I don't think Kemet's for me. But I haven't tried it, so who knows? Maybe it's great. Time's Up, yes, I really like that. That is a really funny party game. I'm going to say, and this is, again, it feels like a huge contradiction, but it feels like it's something other than a board game, because I guess it's because it's something that I would have played in the past as an unpublished game. We used to call it the hat game. You'd write names, put them into the hat, draw them out. You'd have to, basically you'd play Time's Up, but it wasn't a published sort of game. And so as a result, if I was going for a game night, I doubt I would play Time's Up. Whereas if I was just hanging out with a bunch of friends over the Christmas period or something, and we thought, right, well, let's just play it. I might play it, if we didn't have a game around. So Time's Up feels slightly outside of the board game world for me, even though I do have the published version of it. I like it. I like Time's Up. Ganz, Schon, Clever was next on Unfussy Board Games list. So this is a dice game, roll 'em right, from Wolfgang Worsch. It's a really good one. So you're rolling the dice, you're keeping one dice, and then you have to get rid of all the other dice that are lower than the dice you've picked. So you're wanting to pick the lowest dice to give yourself more options later, but the lower dice don't score you as much. It's a really clever system. I must admit I miss the nice sort of aesthetic of Welcome To and Cartographers in this one, even though the gameplay is just as good in Ganz, Schon, Clever, but the fact that it's abstract, doesn't have any sort of theme, it looks like a spreadsheet, just turns me off a little bit. I do prefer just to have that vague sense of setting, an atmosphere around it that Ganz, Schon, Clever misses. But I do really like the gameplay. I'm looking forward to the pinball game from Jeff Inglestein. I can't remember what that's called. But yes, it hasn't come out in the UK yet. But I like that idea of filling out a sheet, but it being a pinball a pinball table. And there's another one as well I'm looking forward to called Floor Plan, where you're filling out a grid and you're placing different rooms in different locations to build a sort of, as an architect, to kind of build a home. I like that idea as well. So I'm looking forward to that one coming out, but again, not out in the UK yet. Next on the list then from Unfussy Board Games was Village. So Village is a game that I do have. Village is a game that I really, really enjoyed when I first had it. Then I got bored of it, felt there wasn't much variety in that box, so I traded it away. Then later on, I thought, oh, my wife would really like Village. I really wish I could play Village with my wife because she hadn't played it. And so I got myself another copy of Village, played it with my wife. She didn't particularly like it, but I really enjoyed it. So as a result, it's had a bit of a checkered history with me, Village. It's an interesting action selection game. I suspect it would be improved with the expansions, Village Port and Village Inn. I've never played it with those, but I've heard good things about them. But because it hasn't really kind of, well, I'm not sure I want to invest in it in the game. So I haven't bought those expansions, but maybe I'll try a friend's copy at some point. Kingsburg is a really good game, really nice game where you're rolling dice and then you're choosing, do you want to spread those dice over multiple different action spaces but taking low value actions, or do you combine the dice and take fewer actions but really powerful ones? The actions give you resources which you can spend to buy these really nice sort of special abilities. It's lovely. The production I have is the Fantasy Flight edition. I know there was a later edition, but my edition, I really like the way it looks. I've always felt the game takes a little bit longer than it should, but I should try again. I haven't played it a huge number of times, and I did really enjoy it. So Kingsberg is, yeah, it's a really good one. It doesn't hit my top 100, but I really, really like it. Skull should like Skull, shouldn't I? I feel like Skull is one of those ones where I've played it with the wrong group. Yeah, so I've sat down to play it and probably with a group of people who didn't really know each other, and so as a result, on a games day, you know, where you're playing with strangers, and so there hasn't been that banter and the bluffing and lying hasn't been as fun as it should be. The production doesn't do anything for me. The table mats, the pub bar mats, you know, that stuff doesn't really work for me. I'd rather, you know, I really like the production of Cockroach Poker, for example, and I suspect it's a similar sort of experience. But I should give this one another chance. It really is right up my alley. So I'm sure if I, you know, got together the right group and the right mood and played this game, I'm sure I would love Skull. Citadels I really didn't like. This is Proof of Duty's most sort of popular game. Played this very early when I first got into the hobby. Played it a number of times. It was one of the first games that was really popular at the time, but I didn't really like. It always felt mean. It felt... I had games of it where I thought I was doing really, really well, and then suddenly somebody would play a card that would just destroy all my plans, and, you know, the crushing disappointment of, you know, I thought I was doing well here, and then someone's just ruined it for me. I found it was a game where I could see the ending coming, and I'm quite looking forward to the end because I wasn't particularly enjoying it, and then someone would play a card that would lengthen the game by 20 minutes, and I hate that in a game where I can see the end coming, and then somebody just goes, right, there we go, and there we go. We've got another 20 minutes now before the game ends. I can't remember why that happened, but that's my lasting memory of Citadels. It is a game that I would actively turn down playing at this point, although I know a load of people really, really like it. So I must be in the wrong. No Thanks. I do really like No Thanks. No Thanks I ought to play more than I do. I've got a really nice German version of it called Shernscheisse, with this fantastic artwork of all sorts of different sort of weird, unfortunate incidents going on. It's a nice sort of push your luck style game again, isn't it? And I do like push your luck. So yeah, I think this is one that very well should have been close to the top 100, shouldn't it? I just haven't played it that much, really. No thanks. Six Nimmt, you'd think was right up my alley as well, wouldn't you? I've always felt Six Nimmt is fun. I would always be happy to play it. I have a version of it called X Nimmt. I think I used to have Six Nimmt, and I used to have another one. Was it called 11 Nimpt or something like that. You could play it with more players, I think, and it was a variant of it. I don't know what happened to that copy. The current copy I have is X Nimpt, which has a slightly altered rule set, and you play it with a lower player count. I believe it's a little bit more strategic than 6 Nimmt, but still, the decisions you make in the game are very, very slight. They have minimal impact on whether you succeed or not. They have a little bit of impact, but not a huge amount. And so that's where it separates from a trick-taking game to me. With a trick-taking game, I feel like I can play intelligently. I can do stuff that's really clever and feel that I've played that well. I don't really get that with 6 Nimmt, although it's a fun time just throwing the cards down. So it wouldn't come anywhere near my top 100, but I do like that whole series of 6 Nimmt, X Nimmt, whatever that other one was, 11 Nimmt, or whatever it was. Ra was next on Unfussy Board Games, suggested games that would be on my top 10. I haven't played Ra. I've played Priests of Ra, which is basically the same game, and that's the version I've got. I think Priests of Ra is probably a more friendlier version. I think a little bit less cutthroat, perhaps more family friendly. I really like the way the game looks. I've only played it, I believe, once, I think, a long time ago, and I really, really liked it. But it was a long time ago, and so it couldn't make my top 100 because why haven't I played it again? That said, I think it's got really, really clever mechanisms. It's got some, I suppose it reminds me a little bit of Rainer Knizia's High Society. It's all, the Priest of Ra is also by Rainer Knizia. That idea of being able to bid, but you've got only very limited bidding tokens and you can't make change. So if you give one of your big bidding tokens, you're losing that token. Although in Priest of Ra, you're then getting another token back. So that little pool of available tokens to bid with is changing from round to round. And you're collecting up different sets of tiles to score in a variety of different ways. Similar to something like Sushi Go or Emotep or something like that. I think I ought to get this to the table again soon. I suspect I could really, really grow to love Priests of Ra or Ra if I had a copy of that version. Okay, right, the other person who predicted my top 10 was Bruce Knight. He said that Evolution would be on there. He's been watching my previous videos because I talk about Evolution all the time. I always say that's my favourite game. So yes, obviously that was going to be on there. Abyss, he suggested. Yes, indeed, Abyss is my second favourite game, and I've mentioned that a few times as well. So Bruce has been watching closely. He said maybe there'd be one more game from the Mask trilogy because Cuzco and Tikal had already been on the list. Mexica didn't make my top 100. I do really like Mexica. Certainly if we'd gone to 150, maybe 120, 130, it would be in there. Okay, Mexica I feel is a very different game to Cuzco and Tikal. It just feels different. In some ways it feels meaner. You're jumping in there, taking slots, someone else thinks they're doing well and you just jump in there with your pieces and steal it away from them or block them off so that they can't achieve what they were going for. So it's a little bit more cutthroat, but again, a beautiful, beautiful production by Super Meeple in the most recent version. But I've always felt it's the weakest of the three for me. But I do like it. It uses similar mechanisms, action points and all of that stuff. So again, not a game to play with people who are prone to sitting and taking ages to take their turn. Right, next game on Bruce's list again. He says Skull. Yeah, okay, I've already said I really need to explore that more. Then he says Perudo, or Liar's Dice. Yes, I really like Perudo. Again, Perudo is a game that I suppose I played before I got into the hobby board games, the modern board games. It was never a sort of huge favourite, but I did play it. And as a result, I've always felt like it was a game that from before, like a mass market style game. And I don't have any. I'm not the snob I once was about the mass market. I suppose I used to turn my nose up at that. I don't really anymore, and so I ought to give it another chance. But a bit like Time's Up, it just feels like something a little bit outside of the hobby. It's never a game that I would particularly reach for, even though I think it's really, really good and really, really clever. So yeah, great game, but not one that emotionally connects with me, Perudo. Anomia is a fantastic game. Anomia is a speed reaction game where you're turning over a card, someone else is turning over a card, and if the symbols on the two cards match, you have a race to call something out. And you've got to say something which is written on the other person's card. So it might say types of ice cream, or it might say, I don't know, supermarket or something like that. And you've got to call out like a supermarket, so Tesco or whatever, or you've got to call out a type of ice cream, you know, before the other player, or a sports team, or a celebrity, or whatever it says on the card, and then in order to win the card. And of course, you're trying to do it so quickly that you're falling over yourself. You can't get the words out, hence the name Anomia. It's hilarious. It's really, really funny, really, really good, and I really like those sort of speed games. Anomia was a big inspiration for Big Bazaar, along with other similar games like Jungle Speed and Snorter, and then a little bit of things like Ghost Blitz and stuff like that thrown in there as well. The main thing I found with Anomia is that I just think it's ugly. Just everything's the text, the symbols. It's just got the absolute minimum on those cards, and so I wanted Big Bazaar to be something quite beautiful. Lots of images, no text. I didn't want anyone to have to read or anything like that. And I wanted a lot of variety in the different ways that you could play. So lots of variants that sort of creep in there, and the game keeps changing as you play it. Next on the list then for Bruce Knight was Pick a Pig. I love Pick a Pig. Pick a Pig would definitely be close to my top 100. Pick a pig, pick a dog, pick a polar bear, pick a seal. Doesn't matter which one you play. Or you could buy two of them and mix them together and play a larger game. In Pick a Pig, you have a grid full of cards, you know, laid out on the table, and then you've got one card in your hand, and you have to take cards from that grid, but they must have just one subtle change from your card. So the images are all very similar. So it might be that you've got a big pig, and so the next one you want to take is exactly the same pig but smaller, and then the item that they're holding changes, and so you have to take something where he's still small but he's taken one thing, and then he maybe gets bigger, and then maybe he changes colour, but you can only have one difference. If the card that you take has two differences, you've gone wrong and you're getting nothing. But you're doing this at speed, racing against the other players, and then at the end you have to demonstrate that you've got it correct and you haven't made any mistakes, and then you're going to score the points. It's very frantic, but very simple. I love Jolly Thinker's whole range of that whole range of games, Jolly Pets range, with Fruit Spy and Bucket King 3D and Anima Crazy and Bye Bye Black Sheep. You know, these games, none of those would make the top 100, but I do really like them. But Pick a Pig is certainly, and Pick a Dog are certainly the best of the bunch. And yeah, just really fun speed games. So anyway, that's my thought on your predictions. There weren't many that you guys got correct. So maybe I'm not that predictable. But I really appreciate you joining in and watching and commenting. I think it'll probably be a little while before I make too many more videos, because that took me a load of time, and I do have another job as well as my game. Game designing is my sideline, but I'm a dentist. Hard time to be doing dentistry in the pandemic, and I've got a lot of other stuff going on. So I don't know when it will be that I'll make a video again, but please keep watching. There's loads of other videos, of course, on my channel to go back and watch on Adam's Board Game Wales. Follow me on Twitter @BoardGameWales. On Board Game Geek, I'm Adam78. So thanks very much for watching. All the best.